Anyway, happy New Year to everyone. Glad you're all here. And we have a interesting year in front of us. Uh, and let's see well, everybody has their names up, so we don't need to introduce anyone. Um, anyway, so our first topic is a black belt is a black belt a very dirty white belt, traditional, teaching grade, or are there any criteria beyond technical knowledge to teach? A bunch of certificates or wallpaper, or way of life, philosophical day-to-day implications. So I'm just going to throw the question out, see if anybody wants to respond to it, or
I want to start just by saying that it's all of the above except wallpaper.
Well, I mean, it's by wallpaper, I mean there are some sensei and some dojo who have enough certificates on the wall that it literally is wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
And you how do you say,
perspective, right, Sensei? I mean, if how much usually, um, well, realistically, getting to a certain level takes time. Time, effort, commitment, dedication. There's life that's involved, and you can go on through the countless things that kind of impact your ability to be able to get to the things that you really would like to do, whether it's martial arts or something else. Um, but when you get to a certain point, how much of that can be truly committed to a system to get to a certain level to where you have so many of these things that they're all over the place,
yeah,
quote unquote, wallpaper.
it's if someone's got a fourth or sixth or seventh or eighth dan in about 8 or 9 different martial arts, you have to wonder, because I'm going to say, I think in any martial art to get that high takes years of concentrated effort, and one human can only do so much. I mean, that's why I say to people, if you see wallpaper, you find out what the person is teaching. If you see wallpaper, maybe you need to ask for the address of the organization. Some organizations have their contact information on their certificate or their name, and you can check it out and contact them. And some organizations prefer to stay in the dark, so to speak. And that if you're gonna put stuff up, it has to be credible, and it has to have what do you call it? It has to have a paper trail, for lack of a better phrase, because that's your credibility.
Right.
You
Yeah,
also
so
become
that's
an example. You also become an example to others when you get the black belt, because other also want to be black belt, so they kind of take your style and your way of being to their style of the training jiu-jitsu. So I see you also become an example for everyone and for the sport as a black belt, because everybody looks up to a black belt.
Okay.
I think that if you have systems or maybe certifications certificates that are parallel, very closely related, similar, or the same type of a system. Jiu-jitsu is a great example. There's a lot that are very close. If you have that, then maybe there's a possibility of having more than if you were to have something, a claim in jiu-jitsu and then a claim in some other martial art style, multiple different systems, styles, rules, or whatever. Then it becomes more questionable at that point.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Yeah.
And then you have some other systems that are out there, and this may take us off track a little bit, but I think it's worth mentioning. Then you talk about the credibility of, we're referring to wallpaper, meaning that there may not be credibility behind it. And there's some systems that are out there that if you compete in something, a sporting event or whatever, and you're successful in that event, then they automatically award you rank. Well, does that mean that you're credible with what you're claiming to have as in rank? And maybe that's another question, but I certainly think it was worth mentioning with the topic.
Yeah, and because in different systems, different organizations do have different promotional criteria, and that's sometimes where you run into problems, to put it tactfully.
Right.
And that's the original criteria, right? It all comes from judo, the belt, the whole belt and cue down system, right? And I think judo is that's kind of how you get your rank, is through the shiai, right? So if you're a white belt is consistently defeating and getting ippon on brown belts, you're a brown belt, regardless of what you know in the curriculum. And I think that's like the original way you would get your belts, was through that. And then it kind of became, I think it was Taekwondo that made it become that incentivized colors. It was just white or black in judo, right? Originally. But then I think that incentive thing of changing the colors along the way and giving you things to look for and awarding it for the curriculum stuff, that kind of came later. It used to be who you beat.
And that competitive dynamic is still in place in certain arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think, where if you're a blue belt who's consistently submitting purple belts, that's a sign that you're ready for promotion.
Tom, we don't have any video.
I was wondering
Yeah,
where
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm
Yeah, I'm on a phone right now. I apologize. I'm not in my usual place, so I'm just. It's going to have to be audio. I'll see what I can do. But
Okay.
I knew it was you, Tom. I just didn't know where to find you.
Okay. Is my name showing up on the screen?
Yeah, he's being incognito.
Yeah, got to do that sometimes.
He's practicing his ninja skills. Okay. Yeah, it's we need to get back to the question, what is a black belt? I think that's the core question. And
yeah, and to me too, I think I like that. I think it's two things. I like that dirty white belt analogy, that it's almost like I talked to a guy one time who was a physicist who writes physics textbooks, and he was like, the physics that you think you learned when you got like an A in high school physics and you think you know physics, he's like, you're not even ready to begin to start doing real calculations in real physics. It's like you don't start learning that until you're a PhD candidate. Then you start learning physics. And I think it's kind of like that with karate. Like when you have or any martial art, I mean, like the ranking system, when you get to a black belt, that means you're a really good white belt. You're really good at being a white belt, at learning that material, at doing those techniques. But then you're really bad at understanding everything you were doing. And now you're beginning that. So you're kind of a white belt at being a black belt, but you're a black belt at being a white belt, if that makes sense.
it makes sense to me. Yeah, I would agree with that. And as you said earlier, the colorization of belts is an American thing, which has worked its way back to Japan. I guess they thought it was a good idea.
I'd say it's interesting. The public's perception of a black belt is an expert, and yet a black belt's perception of a black belt is as an intermediate martial artist who's beginning to really learn their art form.
Yes. Okay. So and there are people, and I know some that they've gone into a karate or some other commercialized program, and it was on their bucket list to get a black belt. And once they get their black belt, their first degree black belt, then they drop out and they're gone because it was something to do. And I mean, that may be a whole other issue, but like you said, people mystify the black belt. They think a black belt is someone who knows a lot. And there's an old saying somewhere, some goes something like, the more you know, the more there is to learn. Or a little knowledge is an evil thing, something of that sort.
Yeah, I agree,
Thoughts?
Sensei. I think that I had an opportunity to spend a little time with Dave over the holidays, and very very pleasurable meeting with him. And in part of our conversation, I was expressing myself that the fact that when I was finally awarded a black belt, I realized at that time that how little I knew. But it did start to resonate with me. At that point, it really kind of opened my eyes.
Yeah.
And it used to be a tradition that you would like Socrates would say the wise man knows that he doesn't know anything.
Right.
There used to be a tradition when I was growing up. Red belt wasn't the very top. It used to be white belt was the very top, and it was a theoretical thing that you couldn't ever reach. And then that kind of fell by the wayside, and nobody mentions that anymore. That's like an old thing. But it used to be you'd start off white, go black, turn red, and ultimately turn white again to show that. That's why a lot of people, when they get the silk black belts, they'll fray it off so it's turning white again. Everybody likes that gray black belt thing, so it's turning white. But the idea would be you got to the point that you finally understand everything enough to understand that you don't understand anything.
You mean you didn't take the razor blade along the edge of the belt to make it look like you've been a black belt for years?
Drag it behind the car. Yeah.
I've heard
Also,
that one, Dave, dragging it behind the car.
The concept of going back to returning to white belt also plays into the idea of beginner's mind for some martial artists, where no matter how advanced you are, you want to maintain that openness to new developments, and instead of becoming stale. And that's kind of symbolized by that for some people.
Okay. Yeah, the white belt, I've seen it where they go. I think in Budoshin, someone came up with, I don't even think it was me, came up with at some point you can wear a red and white belt, and then you get a red belt. I know in some systems after the red belt, like you said, they go to white belt, and it's a double wide white belt to differentiate you from a new student. But I think, Seki kind of had, he rarely wore anything other than black belt. What he did was, he says, because you go to different dojos and different systems, and they don't, in some systems, the red belt is actually below black belt. It's one of the, colored belts. And then you have stripes that go the length of the belt as well. It's amazing what's out there. You can pay a fortune for a belt. But what he would simply do was, he would say, you're a black belt. If you're a first degree black belt, you get some red electrical tape. One strip around it is Shodan, 2 strips is Nidon, 3 strips is Sandan, and so on. Of course, by the time you get to 10th, you've got 10 stripes on there. That's it looks a bit much, but at least a person knows what your rank is, your Dan grade. But but again, some systems in the black belt level or Udansha level, I'll say, will go to different colored belts as well. And it still looks like a Christmas tree when you buy them all up.
I don't think it's such a thing in jujitsu and judo. I feel like the wearing of the red or the red and white belts come just with rank. But definitely in most karate styles, you don't just get to wear that. You have to be awarded a title. So like in addition to being like a 6th dan or whatever, you also have to be given the title of Renshi.
Right, or something.
Like it's a separate certificate, and then you can wear the red and white belt or whatever.
Right.
So that's an added thing to confuse everyone.
Something else I'll toss in here, when I'm invited to visit another person's dojo, when I show up, I will consistently wear a white belt into their dojo. I don't know if they care what rank I am or not, when I meet and greet the sensei that's heading things, I want to be wearing that white belt for a variety of reasons, none of which I think need explanation to anyone here. And it's a great starting point for a nice rapport. Basically, my main statement by wearing that is I'm here to learn.
Right.
To learn what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you do what you do, and to not question anything other than for informational purposes. So it just feels right.
Yeah,
I also, as a black belt, I also have it. So my philosophy is also the learning thing. I see you can learn a lot from other black belts. So I think you learn it. You learn more when you become a black belt because you take the books and all the material into the training. When I was a lower belt, you just have you go follow the belts as they are written in the belt exams, and you learn the techniques. But when you become a black belt, it's more self studying the style and self studying, and there's the limit is open to what you can learn from others, other
Right.
black belts, and also other people. So it's a lot of learning. And for me, it's as Dave said, it's a big learning process being a black belt. That's the same for me also.
Yeah, I think that is true in any subject area, any profession, any hobby, avocation. Once you get beyond, I don't know what you call it, once you get beyond the basic level, you have to be self-motivating, and then it's amazing. You find out what you don't know, what you need to learn. And when you learn stuff, it ends up you have to learn more because I found from writing, and this is getting into another topic, the next one now, so I won't say anything. But in any case, it's a continuous process. You kind of find yourself stuck, like the hamster on the wheel. The more you know, the more there is to learn. Going back to Dave's comment on the white belt, if I always have in addition to my black belt, which is in my key bag, I keep a white belt in there. And if I visit another dojo, my first question to the sensei before I even, when I introduce myself, etc., I'll say, would you like me to wear a white belt or would you like me to wear my rank? And it's a matter of courtesy. And sometimes they'll have me wear a white belt. Sometimes they'll say, wear your colored belt. But I want that decision to be that dojo sensei's decision because it shows respect to him and his dojo and his students. And that's something that's very important when you visit another dojo, is to, for lack of a better phrase, be humble. Because if you walk in like God's gift to mankind, you may get carried out as devil's advocate. For lack of
tell you something else, because we're talking about how it's the beginning point for a lot of knowledge. But something else that I found really even before the black belt level is as I gained rank, I had more material to review and maintain. So when I got, not just in class when you got what you're going to be teaching, but I would get with other people along the way to review not just the belt levels I was testing for, but the other material. And as a black belt, you've got you got a lot of techniques. In our system, about 150 techniques to review and maintain. And you're not going to keep all of them at the tip of your spear, but it's good to continually review so that they're more and more ingrained over time.
And if you're actually teaching, students will ask you, what can I do for this? Or what can I do if this doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
And, particularly if you're in a one-to-one situation, and you as a black belt can't say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to say, we'll study that later or something of that sort. But you can't say that too often either, because students, regardless of age, are smart and they can figure you out. And if you're constantly coming up with excuses, it's an indicator that you're missing some training or knowledge somewhere. And it's not just knowledge of techniques, it's knowledge of terminology, it's knowledge of theory. A lot of other things come into play.
Was it you, George Kirby, that said that when you become a black belt and you get higher up in ranks, I don't know if I read it in one of your books or you have said it, that you have to be able to do a counter technique for every technique when you come very high up in ranks. So you have to be able to adapt all your learning and also to invent, if there isn't learned a counter technique, then you have to kind of understand the style of Jujitsu to make a counter attack to the learned technique.
Right. Yeah, there is a difference between being able to execute a technique and being able to explain it so that another student can do it, or to explain the theory behind the technique. You have all these different levels of knowledge that you, as a sensei, particularly in jiu-jitsu, are expected to know. And the downside of that, I've said it, I think in an editorial someplace, is that, and I've seen it, and I've done it myself, a jiu-jitsu sensei can explain a technique to death. And I've also gotten myself in a situation where I've spent so much time explaining the technique, by the time I get to the students and say, okay, now do this, inevitably it's, what technique are we supposed to do? and it's a common problem that it's, I think, more so in jiu-jitsu than any other martial art. And it's, on the one hand, it's a compliment to the senseis, it's a compliment to the system, it's a compliment to the art. On the other hand, you can put your students to sleep. Because they're not following you anymore.
That's a simple pacing issue.
A what? Pacing? Yeah,
It's a simple pacing issue. Yeah. And pacing is critical in all teaching. And all of us get it wrong from time to time, no matter how experienced we are.
and sometimes I found that if it's a quote unquote more complicated technique, I'll actually have them do the technique in bits and pieces and put it together. A technique has several steps. Sometimes if you can do it that way, sometimes that's the easiest way to get them to learn it. But that's just a teaching approach, rather than what's a black belt.
This might be a good time to bring up, I don't know if we've talked about it here before, but I think it's coming to me that there's kind of a thread through what we're talking about today between what is a black belt and talking about writing and the other topics. There's a concept of shu ha ri. Have we talked about that before?
The term is familiar. I don't recall it offhand.
So it's kind of poorly explained. It goes like this. In the shu level, you kind of don't know what you're doing and you're sort of seeking information and knowledge. You're a student. At the ha level, you've learned that technique. You're, let's say, a black belt, right? So now you've mastered the beginning techniques. You know what's going on. You have proficiency at the thing that you didn't understand before. Then the next level is ri, which is where you kind of transcend what you've learned and you start kind of thinking, maybe some of the things I learned were wrong and maybe I could do better. Maybe there's other answers out there. And then you kind of become a student again and you expand on what you learned. And then you become a teacher that's past what the teacher you learned from was able to do, that kind of thing. It's almost like the same thing as Bruce Lee's like absorb what is useful, reject what you don't like, and then add your own thing,
Yeah.
like that kind of deal.
I think, yeah, I wrote this down as you said. I think we hit upon this three
We did.
things ago.
Yes.
But yeah, it is. I mean, it's becoming a black belt is a process. Becoming a good black belt is, I think, becoming a good black belt is different from becoming a black belt. A black belt means you've learned the skills, the basic skills. But good black belt is to me, this person is, they can not only explain the technique, they can teach the technique, and to me, they're willing to teach. Because in Budoshin Jujitsu and a black belt is a teaching grade, and ideally, and I've not been too successful on this, ideally, I'd like to see every black belt out there teaching. And I've had, a lot of our black belts are, it's their bucket list was to get a shodan, they're happy. Now some of the shodans have dropped out for physical or medical reasons. I can understand that. But if Seki's attitude was, if you're gonna become a black belt and you're gonna teach. I mean, he never asked questions. It was, that's the way it is. And if you're not going to teach the shodan, goodbye. You can't do that today. But that to me is the disappointing part, is that, they know ahead of time that that's my expectation of it. To someday go out and teach, or teach it in another dojo, or even teach it in my dojo. But some just don't want to do it. I know that going out and starting your own dojo is an incredibly difficult task. Even if you're not doing it for a living. God forbid you should have to do it for a living. Because that's, it's hard work. But some people do it. And I have a great deal of respect for anyone who can make it financially in the martial arts world. It takes a lot of business acumen, for lack of a better phrase. But I mean, I'm not necessarily after that in my black belts, but I wish more of them would go into teaching somewhere, community service, what have you. And to me, teaching is the fun of it. And helping others learn is the fun of it to me. And watching them succeed is a better fun. That's good. Is that good grammar? Better fun? More fun. I mean, to see a student be able to do something that I've taught them to do, gives me a lot of satisfaction. Hopefully them too. But to me, that's the fun of teaching. And to have someone become a black belt, it's a measure of their success. It's a measure of my success. But then to have them go out and teach somewhere on their own, that makes me feel even better. But so anyway, I don't know if I'm off topic here, but that's what a black belt is to me, is someone who's ultimately giving his knowledge to others and helping others learn. And like I said, that can be in their own dojo, that can be in my dojo. So anyway,
Sensei, when we looked at that, the Shuha and Ri, that Dane was mentioning a few weeks back. It was, I believe, in the form of unconsciously unskilled, and then consciously unskilled, and then consciously skilled, and then finally unconsciously skilled.
Right. Right.
Those four. It's like a hierarchy.
Right.
And I think that's what you were referring to, perhaps.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Like I said, we've hit on this topic before.
Mhm.
And I mean, it applies in any subject area or whatever you do in life. But anyway, yeah, that's what happens, for lack of a better phrase.
If you have a white belt on or a black belt on, it doesn't really matter if you have the expertise, because you have the possibility to even show what you can with the white belt. So if you can something, then the belt, I see it doesn't really matter what rank you have if you are good at things. If you are as a black belt, if you show yourself as a black belt in a white belt or a black belt, the expertise will show what you can.
Anybody want to react to that?
Are you kind of saying like it doesn't matter what, like, kind of turning the question backwards, right? Like, what is a white belt? Like, if you walk into somebody's dojo and you put that white belt on, like, are you a white belt? Can you truly be a white belt? Right? Your expertise and your knowledge is going to show through. Like, no matter what belt you wear, you're still a black belt, right? Is it what you wear,
Yeah,
kind of
that
who
was
you are?
what I meant. Very good said. Yeah, that was what I meant. But
Yeah.
your presence and your expertise will show that you are a black belt, even wearing the white belt. If you decide to take the white belt and introduce yourself as a white belt.
No, that's really hard. I mean, I've been in that situation. It is very hard to be a white belt if you are a black belt. But I think that's why I ask the sensei, what would you prefer I wear? See, it's out of respect to them and their dojo. They know what my rank is. If I'm wearing dojo and organizational patches on my gi, the other students are going to say, this person must know something. So it's not a matter. I don't think you have to do things as a white belt unless the sensei wants you to. On the other hand, if the sensei is teaching a technique in a certain way, it's your responsibility to follow his instruction. And as I've told my black belts, the only time, and I've never had to do this, the only time you don't do that is if you're so sure that what the instructor is teaching is going to be a serious safety hazard to the other students. And then that becomes, how do you get out of that situation and save face for yourself and the sensei? Because you don't want to embarrass a sensei. Because at the end of the class, you can walk out the door. He has to come back to the next class. So it really, you really, if you visit a dojo and you go somewhere, you really have to ask the sensei, how he would like you to respond or behave or what have you. Because you don't do it, like I say, you don't want to do anything to put the sensei on the spot, because that's a sign of respect. Anyway,
So if we look at the stuff through that hierarchy we mentioned several weeks back, a white belt could be construed as someone who is unconsciously unskilled. They don't even know what it is they need to know to do anything. You're just there to learn, to discover. And when I visit a dojo, that's the attitude I take in. I want to go in as an unconsciously unskilled person in what it is they're teaching and how they're doing it. So I generally will refrain from even asking questions, because questions can be asked on an intelligent level that would give away knowledge that I don't want to give away. I'm only there to learn.
Right.
I'm only there to discover. It's a mission of discovery. So that's compatible with my white belt. I understand the respect of asking someone, but the reason that I choose not to do that is that I don't want to put them on a spot of making a decision and then having them decide, well, what should I do here? Or, second guessing themselves or whatever. So I just go in and answer the question without asking it. I just wear the white belt in.
Yeah.
And following up with that, as an analogy, I would say that from unconsciously unskilled, you move up consciously unskilled, and now you're aware of what you don't know, that you want to know. You begin to learn that, and then as a black belt, you're consciously skilled. You're at that third level. You're aware of what you know well enough to test on it and be able to, pass that black belt exam and all that it goes with it. When you move up beyond Shodan, that's when the unconscious skills can set in, where you have done things for so many years, for so long, that you forget that you used to do things the way some of these entry-level belts are doing it. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, to myself, why would anybody do it that way? And then I go, oh yeah, I used to do it that way when I was learning. And so they remind us of the times when we were less skilled or unconsciously unskilled.
I think to add to what you're saying is, if I visit I go in there with an open mind.
Absolutely.
Because I know even from Seki, he showed variations of techniques up the kazoo. And so my attitude is, I will try what this person is teaching because I may learn something from it. I may learn a different way to do the same technique. I may learn to do a different, part of the technique differently. I think where black belts run into problems, and again, I've seen this, is they say, in our system, this is the one way we teach this technique. And that's the only way. They've been taught this, and they haven't been taught variations or subtle differences. And for a person who's learned only one way, they have a very narrow focus. It's very hard for them to change their focus and expand their view, because that's not what they're trained at doing. And when they teach, they will end up saying their response, if a technique isn't working for a particular student, is you're not doing it right, or try harder. And my response will be, well, if this is not working for you, let's try this variation. And I think that is a critical difference in how students learn. And what I look at, particularly in my mid-level black belts beyond Shodan, is, are they rigid, or are they, here's another way? Or, do you have a physical limitation? What can we do to work around it?
Yeah, I would echo everything you've just said, George, and that ability to adapt and have more options is probably the single most critical quality to more advanced black belts, as opposed to Shodan or below. That lack of rigidity and having a dozen options in a given situation, I think that's critical. I would also say that the belt system is perhaps most valuable at the lower ranks and colored belt ranks, where there's the possibility of injury and the convenience of having a sensei look at an entire class and seeing 10 students and realizing that this group could be doing this, the other group could be doing that, because of their relative advanced level. Avoiding accidents and instilling learning through those very basic distinctions, that can be helpful. But once you get into advanced black belt levels, it's more obscure. Reasons for advancement are are more abstract than they are at the lower levels. But I think you've hit the nail on the head regarding the flexibility issue. That's critical.
Yeah, I think part of it, and I even saw this when I taught in public school, I mean, history or economics or advanced basket weaving. I think, like up through Shodan, they're trying to do the technique correctly. They're trying to do the technique right, because they're trying to get this foundation down, and they need to be able to do it right to have a firm foundation to build. It's like building a house. You have to have a firm foundation. And then at some point, starting Nidon or somewhere along the line there, they start learning there's more than one right way. And that can be very challenging to some people, because that messes with their sense of security. You know, to realize there's more than one right answer.
Yeah, I think a good way to put it is like a white belt, and that, you know, everything in that area there is about method.
Yes.
And then black belt is about outcome, right? So like as a black belt, you're like, I'm going to put this person on the floor right here. And that's your goal. But as a white belt, you're like, I'm going to execute a hip throw right now. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe you're not. Yeah.
And that's, you know, you could even at this point you could even start talking to, you know, I say Mushin even comes into play, which we've discussed before. Whereas for a lower rank, if they, you know, or a system where there's only one right way to do it, that's the way their mind is trained. And as you get to black belt or higher, you begin to realize, this is assuming you've had self-defense training, situational training, you do whatever technique doesn't come to mind, because you're not necessarily trying to do the right technique, because that's no longer a factor. Anyway, anything else we want to do with this topic? What is a black belt? Or do we want to move on to the next one? Okay.
Just one quick thing, since you mentioned Mushin, maybe this is something we want to talk about another time, is the idea of Zanshin. I don't think we added that in when we were talking about Mushin, where Mushin is kind of like the state of mind of emptiness and all of that. Then Zanshin is like the end state after you've executed your technique of like empty readiness and all of that. That might be something we want to circle back on in that kind of Mushin framework.
I also view Zanshin as often a pre-Mushin state. You know, the situational awareness of Zanshin is healthy.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
also get what you're saying, Dane, about afterwards, you know, striking that ready position and going back to a Zanshin state. I'll tell you who knows most about this of anybody I've met, some guy named Darren Mellerine.
Yeah, okay, that would be a good one to do a comparison to, because again, Zanshin can be confusing, because it's, even as you said, Darren, it's readiness for the next stage, and that readiness is essentially an empty mind, so that you can take in and respond. Anyway, so okay, let's move on here. Okay, but I'm going to add it on. Okay.
I have one quick comment about the Mushin Zanshin.
Okay.
I was on, and I think everybody will find this a little entertaining, Sensei. There was a question proposed by Black Belt Magazine, and it was, what is your favorite kata? And my response to that was, my favorite kata is Mushin / Zanshin.
That answered the question and left them all confused. No, I shouldn't. You know, it's kind of like it's the answer that's a non-answer. Very, very good, Darren. Anyway, okay. Which comes first? You know, the Zanshin or Mushin, or the chicken or the egg, or the donkey or the cart, or whatever. Anyway, okay, let's go on. That's a good philosophical issue there. Okay. Let me jot that down. And what comes first? How to do it that way. Okay. Okay, next topic is value and challenges of writing. I know Dave's done some writing. I know I have. I don't know about anyone else.
Does anyone have to read it to call it writing?
No.
Then I've written.
I'm not saying it has to be public. See, I left out the word. I kept publications separate, I think, because sometimes if we write things down, it forces us to think more. I mean, that's, you know, I've learned more in the process of writing quote unquote books than I would have learned otherwise, because I start writing and say, wait a minute, I don't understand this. What's going on? I need to figure this out. It's like you said with physics. Physics in high school, for me, was a no-brainer. It was an easy A. Physics in college, I took 2 physics courses as a general ed requirement. It was still almost a no-brainer. I enjoyed it because it was logical. I like logical science. But I also know that in physics, there's a lot of illogical stuff, and that's basically stuff that no one has a solution for yet, or it's unexplained, or whatever other explanation you want to give. And that applies probably in everything in life. But yeah, I'm not saying that this has to be something that's published.
I appreciate that question right there, Tom, because if you say that, then I have a ton of material that I've written, nothing ever published or even close to being in a format of being published. But a prime example of yesterday, I was reading something and I wanted to write down one thing. So in a moment of writing down my one thing, this is what I ended up with, front and back. And that's I have transferred all that over to a digital format, but that's me all the time. If I start to write down one thing, it turns into something that I just don't stop with. So I have nothing published. I have a bunch of, let's call it notes. But yeah, so there you go.
That's perfectly all right, because if you write things down, then you have to look at what you've been thinking. Essentially, you're looking at what you've been thinking, and I'm not going to, I hate to use a phrase black and white, but it puts it down in black and white, and you say, this doesn't make sense, or I need to write more about this to have it make sense. And I'm not looking. I had my students regarding junior high. I had them do tons of writing. I said, pick a topic and write about it. This is in a history class. I said, take a position on any issue, write about it. Give me your reasoning. And with some of the kids, I'd go back and forth the whole semester on one essay. And at the end of the semester, they're dealing with a stack of papers where we've just had feedback back and forth. And that's the process of writing. And Aaron, you've learned from it. Obviously, I've learned from it. I don't make it a matter of, Darren, are you writing incomplete sentences? How's your grammar? Is your spelling okay? Are you using abbreviations? Don't use abbreviations, because whoever else reads it may not be able to understand. I don't care about all that stuff. Because the secret is, because I read a lot as a kid, I can't get past a verb and a noun in English if you ask me to break down a sentence, which is what killed me in foreign languages. I can't get past a verb and a noun, but I can write well because I read a lot. And that, like I said, that killed me when I got into foreign language. Prepositional phrase, are you kidding? Is that something that happens on a date? Anyway.
In a foreign language, Sensei, it's really important to learn adjectives.
Yes.
I know that.
Yes.
Because then you know what people are calling you.
And when I took Spanish back in the late 50s and 60s, it was 95% written, which makes it even worse. So anyway, but like I said, I think the value of writing is you get to confront what you're thinking, and it's in my opinion, to me, that's a key process in learning, because if you're capable of realizing, you write something down, you realize this doesn't make sense, or I need to know more, and you're motivated, you will find out, and that's part of your education as a human being, I guess. And if you do that, it's amazing what you can learn, even about yourself.
It's like a way for two parts of your brain to have a conversation with each other.
Yeah.
Like, what do you really think about this? Once one side challenges the other side, you might
Yeah.
get a different answer, right? You end up like, oh, I don't think that after all. It's actually this now that I've written it down.
Yes, the brain is an amazing thing, but sometimes it just needs an exterior, how do you say, the writing is an exterior manifestation of what's going on between your ears. And it allows you maybe to be a little more objective. And, so like it says here for personal gratification, to get ideas written down. And some people just get a lot of, Darren obviously gets a lot of satisfaction from just writing things down, because he's then able to explore them more effectively. I assume I'm correct, Darren.
Yes, that is correct, Sensei.
And that's fantastic. Because it means we're willing to look at and possibly even criticize what we're thinking. Because we want to, we want to get it right. We want to get not a understanding, but the understanding of what's going on. And sometimes the best way to do it is just to write it down and see what happens.
One thing I think is a danger of writing things down, however, if you're letting people read it, is I think sometimes it's very important not to answer certain questions that students need to answer. It's like ruining the ending of a movie for somebody.
Yes.
You can't really, like, what you'll get out of this once you've been doing this for 30 years is you'll find out that there is no technique or whatever. You can't tell them that right away. You need to develop and learn and go through that yourself. So there's a danger too in kind of spoiling the fun for people when you tell them things.
Yeah, I mean,
right away.
When I interacted with student essays, I tell them right up front at the beginning of the semester, I'm going to be a devil's advocate. I said, you won't know. Sometimes you're going to think I'm very conservative. Other times you're going to think I'm very liberal. And it's not because I disagree with you. I just want you to think more. And once we establish that relationship and they realize it's nothing personal, it's amazing how more open people will become, because they trust you. And that's, to me, that's the importance of exchanging what you write, is because if you can do it in a credible manner, in a respectable manner, more people will like you, or will agree with you. Okay, you may develop a following, become a newscaster or God knows what else, president of the United States. But in any case, you know, it's a way of, if other people, you can say something to someone, but if you put it in writing, that's more serious than saying something. Because like you said, they can take what you've written and show it to someone else, and hopefully that other person will interpret it the same way as the first person. And that's one of the problems.
It also helps remembering things. Remember, if you write something down, then I have the tendency to look back at what you have written down, just to what was it I have written down, what was it to remember, and so it helps remembering important things if you write it down. If you don't write it down, then you can easily forget it also.
Yeah, I mean, yes, writing down helps you remember, because it helps you organize your thoughts. And sometimes you can put stuff together differently once you've written it down.
The only problem for me with that, Sensei, is, and Joni, great point, because when I write it down, I typically don't forget it. But now I write down so many things, I tend to remember that I have it in my notes somewhere.
Yeah, you can't remember everything you've written down. I have the same problem. I put this down someplace, and I'll have something. I'll go to the computer and I'll say, and I'll eventually I'll find it if I'm.
Yeah, right.
So the answer was that it helps you forget things.
Yeah, but it's you know, the frustrating part is the time that it takes to find that stuff, because for some reason once you've written it down, you don't necessarily keep it. You can't. It's harder to find in your brain.
Right.
The ultimate computer.
I try to use those keyword searches a lot, so that's what helps me.
Yes. I understand what you're saying. That search function. Yeah.
I need one here.
Yeah. Another concern I have on writing is, as far as the newsletter, the Kokoro, it is really hard to get. There are a couple, 3 people who write stuff all the time for me. Scott Anderson, Dave Bellman. It's hard to get others to write for me, and I think part of the problem is they're afraid of putting, for lack of a better phrase, they're knowledgeable, but they're afraid of putting themselves out there. Because I don't know, maybe perhaps they don't want to be criticized, or they're concerned they might express an opinion that other people don't agree with. Or they don't think they're qualified to write. And I would like to find some way of getting more people to write and submit stuff to, because you know, it's I like to see different people write, because then, you know, then members of the BJJY or other people will say, can I get in touch with this person? And then there's a process I go through. Like if Darren says, can I get in touch with Dave, and they don't know each other, I would contact Dave by email and say, Darren would like to get in touch with you. Let me know if you want to get in touch with him, and because I respect each other's privacy. And then if Dave says yes, then I'll exchange emails. I'll send you each an email with each other's emails on it. And then you don't need me anymore. I mean, that's the way I usually do it, because I just, you know, I respect the privacy, but I don't want to be involved in the conversation. There's no need for me to be involved in the conversation.
We don't blame you, Sensei. That's a conversation you might not want to be involved in.
That's true too. Yes. You are absolutely right.
I thought Dave was about to say, you gave Darren my contact information.
No, but when people want to get in touch with someone else, I do respect that other person's right to privacy. And that's the way I handle it. I just don't give them the other person's email address, because to me, that's my responsibility to protect the other person's right to privacy. So anyway, and then they can talk about whatever they want to talk about. I don't care. I don't care, as long as it's not about me. No. Anyway, but I'd like to see more people writing for Kokoro. Same for black belt. I think people I know that have tried to write, and they get a rejection notice and they stop. And if you are going to write for a publication, you have to get used to rejection notices. They do happen. I've gotten them. I've had a book that has been sitting on black belt sensei martial arts quote unquote desk for probably 2 years. Now that's not unusual for it to sit around for a year or so before they say yes or no. But I finally pressed the point. I said, I just want to know where it's at. I don't care whether, I'm not asking, are you accepting it or rejecting it? I just want to know where it is in the process. And essentially what was said was that they are not in the book publishing business anymore. Apparently it's not lucrative enough for them. They said at this time. So now I've got the book is being looked at by another publisher, but you can't take rejection notices personally. Because if you write, like you propose an article for Black Belt or any other magazine, you're going to get rejection notices. They're going to say no. Then you come up with another, and eventually you get, if you're persistent, if you're patient and persistent, you will eventually get we like this article, and then that opens the door for you a bit more.
Sensei, it's just like asking a girl to dance when you're in middle school.
Yeah. Great analogy.
Just keep asking.
And George, you've also been through the experience of having books that are incredibly widespread and respected. The core group of Jiu-Jitsu books, the beginner and the intermediate versions, are so widespread, but now I forget if it's one or the other or both of them that are out of print, or I know you have books that have gone out of print, and you continue to produce. And to me, that's to have your recognition that these things have gone out of print, and how I've never had a book published, so I don't know what it's like to have them go to that stage, but at least they're out there and exist as forms of reference. Yeah. I wonder if down the road, the electronic format might be something worth considering. I wonder if any of your books are accessible electronically, just so they're there for access on the internet if someone wants them.
There are a couple that are available via Kindle, but that's going to be really dependent on the publisher. I think if Century Martial Arts wanted to do it, it possibly could. The only thing in the way, and this was while it was Black Belt, at some point Black Belt, when they switched over from film to digital, they someone in their infinite wisdom got rid of all the negatives for all the photos for the books. So if you try to reproduce some of these books in digital form, I forget the term is for pictures.
The photos might pixelate.
The photos pixelate.
Mhm.
And that's one of the major problems. So you can only blow a negative up so much before it pixelates. And that, like I said, that's part of the problem. I often ask, I have a friend who's in the Xerox corporate level business, and can't someone come up with some software that would correct this pixelation issue, or make, I said, it's got to be doable. I mean, and there is now a program that is coming out that may do that, where it can take film and switch it over to digital and take care of the pixelation issue by some formula. But it's not going to be readily available for some time. But that is probably the number one problem. Now, if you have tons of money, if you have $3,000 or $4,000, you can go out and buy a copy of the Jute book. I go to
I was
Amazon.
trying to get that one.
I go to Amazon every once in a while just to see what the price of that book is.
It's in my wish list.
I don't
You
know.
got a jute and no book.
Well, Jute with no book is not going to help you, because it's a vicious little weapon if you know how to use it.
Right
So
there.
far, it's a forearm cracker.
You have two of them.
Oh, come on.
I think I have two of them too, and neither of them are for sale.
Oh. All right, my hunt is on.
I've got two also.
Yeah, but one thing I've done with everyone, and I encourage you to do, if you have a really book that you believe is irreplaceable, is I went to, what was it called before it became FedEx? The printing company, I forget what it was, several years ago, but FedEx will do it too. Is I'll take a book in, and I had to say, yes, I'm the author, so you can do this. I said, I want you to Xerox the entire book and give me a copy of that in PDF format. I mean, I can do it myself, but they can do it a hell of a lot faster. So I have PDF copies of all my books and probably several others.
Well, and that's the virtue of the internet and the web in general, is that once you put something on it, if you create something that's designed to be electronic in its presentation, it's always going to be there in some way or another. And I guess there's the thrill of having a hard copy book published by Century, and that's tremendous, and it attests to your prominence. But on the other hand, looking down the road, anybody who can self-publish or anybody who can create a book has a place to put it now. And even if it's not acceptable to Century, yet you have something to say about the martial arts, and you self-publish and put it out there, it will exist forever. And that, for those of us who may not get published by these prestigious companies, that's kind of edifying. And I'm sure all your stuff will be permanently out there in one form or another too.
But you see, what I have, like, it's called Carbonite, which saves all my files. It costs me a couple $100 a year, but it's excellent backup in case I lose something off my computer, whatever. But let's say the house burns down, I still can access everything that was on my computer, because it's in a different location, and that to me is the value of it. So I look at it as in terms of, it's something that is about, it's like if you have a family album and you really value it, pictures,
Yeah.
make a copy of it, save it on, but also make sure that you've got some external somewhere that all that is being kept. So in case your house burns down, or in some other parts of the country, in case your house gets flooded out. Okay.
Yeah.
you still have, that stuff is quote unquote safe.
Yeah. And compared with what great martial artists and great systems lacked hundreds of years ago, I think you think of hundreds of arts in Japan or Korea or anywhere where there was widespread illiteracy, where it wasn't common to write down or put in some permanent form what you've done. Right now, we have that ability. No matter who you are, you have a centralized place, the web, to put what you know and eternalize it. So,
Right.
And even worse, in exactly to Sensei's point, a lot of classic Chinese and Japanese and Okinawan works were destroyed during World War II.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through bombing and stuff. So like, they actually did write it down and catalog it, and they had all these great scrolls from the masters and family scrolls and family documents and all of that stuff, and it was just destroyed, gone forever.
Yeah.
now we put it in a permanent place. The internet, no matter how bad it is, unfortunately, a lot of bad stuff will be preserved forever too. But we won't lose the good stuff, as you just described, or at the burning of the library at Alexandria or something, where classic works, 2/3 of all works from antiquity, burned to the point where we will never rediscover them. Now everything is there permanently.
Yeah. The just because it came up, one thing that because there are a lot of people that are doing self-publishing now, because there are a lot of companies out there that will do it. Is if you're going to write anything for publication, have someone else proof that that, I don't want to say, how do you say it very tactfully, has a better English background than you do. Have them read what you have written and make corrections or suggestions for corrections, because I have seen some self-published books where you wonder, and I'm going to exaggerate here, how did this person get past the 3rd grade? And that, you don't want to put something out there that ends up being demeaning to you. So it's always worthwhile to get someone to proof what you have written before you put it out there for everyone to see. Because you're trying, when you write and you're putting out there for publication, it's, yes, you want, your intent is to give a certain level of knowledge out there, but you also want, I would hope, want to impress people that you are a competent writer. And competence means that you can have other people assist you so that you look like you're a competent writer. I make mistakes when I write. I'm phenomenal at run-on sentences. I will if I'm going, I will type in sentences and repeat them verbatim, right? Including any mistakes 2 or 3 times. I'll do whole paragraphs that way. And the editor will say, and I don't pick it up when I proof it. And the editor will say, you've repeated this paragraph 3 times now. So,
There's something else. One of my books, I paid a transcriber, and in the original book, the word "there" was spelled correctly, and the transcriber had THEY''RE or something crazy. One example of any number. So I would have done well to, after the original book I wrote was proofed by 7 proofreaders. After the transcriber did it, it wasn't proofed enough. So
right.
it's in the the 2nd edition. So when the 3rd edition comes out, those things are going to be fixed as part of the 3rd edition.
Right.
So even if you pay a transcriber, you're going to have somebody look over their shoulder to make sure that they transcribed what you wrote correctly.
Yeah, I even had on occasion with Black Belt where the editor would rephrase a sentence, okay, and mean, once I got to the editor, we could deal with this fairly informally, and we'd come to, I could call him or her up, and we say, can we agree on rephrasing it? And we come to some sort of compromise statement. But sometimes an editor will rewrite or change a word, and it changes the entire context of a sentence.
Wow.
And so you really have to, once the editor has done their editing, you need to go through and check it again. I mean, so it's something that you have to, how do you say, if you're going to write for publication, you need to check it afterwards just to make sure they haven't changed the meaning of something. I mean, it's sad that you have to do that, but anyway, one of the things I will do if I get a rejection notice, I will, I'll always thank the person, thank you very much, yada, yada, yada. But I also ask, what could I have done to make the article better? And because sometimes when you ask that question, their response will be, if you can do this, A, B, and C, then we will look at the article again. And so that's something, if you're serious about writing, you always have to be able to ask, what could I do to make this article better? And sometimes they will give you good suggestions. Other times they'll say, sorry, we're just not interested. But, my attitude is nothing ventured, nothing gained. But you always have to be very polite, very professional. That's the key. And okay. I think that's about it. I think we're at 9:20. And Joni, some competition there.
Yeah, we have Misa here. She wants to show you what you have seen. What have you bought, Misa?
MTV.
For the weekend. Candies for the weekend.
Candies of the week. What kind of
What is the candies you have bought? You can now say hey to George. Say hey to George. Misa can also Jujitsu.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, do we want to get into the martial artist outside the dojo, or do you want to leave that for next time? It's about 9:22 as it is now.
Next time.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay.
Thank you to everybody for everything. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we'll let everyone go now. Thank you very much for the advice, Darren. I'll check the small print, and life will go on. Anyway, that's about it. So have a good weekend. Take it easy. We'll see you on the 21st. If you have any other topics you'd like to have added to the list, please let me know and I'll add them. And that's about it.
Super.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Okay, so take care.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
If you do anything dangerous, stay safe.
Stay safe.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye, guys.